When my stepmom and dad chose to embark on a lavish vacation without me, labeling me a freeloader and disregarding my role in the family, I finally decided to take back the house that had always belonged to me, reclaiming what was rightfully mine and showing them the consequences of underestimating me and my inheritance. I never truly felt at home in this house, despite having lived here my entire life. Once, it had been a warm and comforting place, filled with my mother's voice, the smell of her homemade pastries, and laughter echoing through the hallways. But after she passed away, everything changed. Or rather, he changed. My father didn't stay a widower for long. Just a year after the funeral, he brought another woman into our home, Lisa. I was still a teenager back then, and her arrival caught me off guard. She was the complete opposite of my mother, cold, indifferent to my feelings, yet always smiling in a way that felt calculated. I had hoped I would get used to her over time, but that never happened. She took over the house as if she had always belonged there. One by one, my mother's belongings disappeared. The pictures I loved were tucked away into drawers, replaced with expensive decorations and furniture that Lisa picked out. My father changed too. He started listening to her in everything, as if his own opinions no longer mattered. If she wanted something done, he did it. If she suggested new plans, he agreed without hesitation. The more time passed, the more I felt like an outsider in my own home. By the time I graduated high school, they didn't even bother to celebrate it with me. A quick congratulations was all I got before they moved on to discussing their upcoming vacation. That was the first time I truly realized I wasn't part of their family. To them, I was just someone who still happened to live under their roof. But I tried to ignore it. I had gotten used to feeling unwanted. I enrolled in college, worked part-time jobs to avoid being completely dependent on them. I didn't want to give Lisa another reason to call me a freeloader. But apparently, that wasn't enough. One evening, as I walked into the kitchen to make tea, I overheard Lisa speaking to my father in the living room. "Don't you think it's time for him to move out?" Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of irritation beneath it. "He's 20 already, and he's still living off of us." My father mumbled something in response, but I couldn't make out the words. "We pay for everything, his food, his living expenses, everything. And what does he contribute? Nothing. He needs to understand that this isn't how the real world works." I froze in place, my hand tightening around the tea mug. Lisa continued, "Anyway, we're leaving in 3 days. We deserve this vacation. It's long overdue, don't you think?" "Of course, sweetheart," my father agreed. I quietly set my mug down and left the kitchen. 3 days. 3 days until they left. And I knew exactly what I had to do. They didn't even pretend to feel guilty about leaving me behind. The day of their departure arrived, and Lisa was practically glowing with excitement. She bustled around the house, double-checking their suitcases, her expensive gold bracelet jingling as she moved. My father, as usual, was glued to his phone, looking calm and detached, like he wasn't about to abandon his own son while heading off on a luxury vacation. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, watching the scene unfold like a spectator at a play. "So, everything set?" Lisa asked, throwing a light jacket over her shoulders. "Yeah, the car will be here in 10 minutes, my father replied, still not looking up. She nodded, then glanced at me for the first time that morning. "You're not upset, are you?" she asked, flashing a perfectly rehearsed smile. I met her gaze, keeping my face blank. "About what?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "Well, about us not taking you with us." She let out a small laugh, like it was the most ridiculous thing in the world. "I mean, you understand, right? These kinds of trips are expensive, and you don't have a stable income yet. We can't just pay for someone who doesn't contribute." Her words stung more than I expected. It was absurd. This house, the very one she was so comfortable living in, belonged to me. It had been my mother's. She had worked hard to secure it for me, to make sure I had something that was truly mine. And now Lisa was calling me a freeloader? I tightened my grip on my coffee cup, forcing myself to stay calm. "Of course," I muttered. "I understand." Lisa's smile widened in satisfaction. "Good," she said. "Oh, and we left you some money for groceries. Just don't waste it on junk food, okay?" I said nothing. Minutes later, a car pulled up outside. I watched as Lisa and my father stepped out of the house, laughing, their bags in tow. She hooked her arm through his, and together they got into the waiting taxi. The door slammed shut. The tires rolled down the driveway. And just like that, they were gone. I exhaled slowly, turning to look at the empty house around me. My house. And I realized something. This was my chance. The silence of the house settled around me like a heavy blanket. It was almost eerie. The usual hum of conversation, the clinking of dishes, the sound of footsteps, none of it was there anymore. The house felt like it belonged to someone else. I stood in the living room, looking around at the lavish decorations Lisa had chosen. The once warm space now seemed cold, distant, and foreign to me. Her expensive taste had replaced the cozy, lived-in feel this house used to have. The familiar warmth my mother had cultivated was long gone. But I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. I had been patient long enough. They had crossed a line when they called me a freeloader, when they treated me like a stranger in my own home. This wasn't just their house, it was mine. I took a deep breath and walked upstairs to my room. It was a small space, but it had always felt like my sanctuary. I sat down at my desk, pulled out the folder I'd been keeping hidden for years, and flipped through the pages. The papers were old, yellowed with age, but they were clear. I ran my fingers over the text. Property owner, my name. My mother had taken care of everything. She knew how volatile my father could be, how easily he would be swept away by someone like Lisa. So, she made sure that, after her death, the house would go to me. She'd signed everything, no legal loopholes, no confusion. The house was mine. I had never really thought about it much, at least not until now. But seeing those words on paper gave me a new sense of power, a sense of control I'd never had before. My father had no idea I knew about this. He'd always assumed that, because I was underage when my mother passed, the house would eventually fall to him. But now that I was 20, I had every right to claim it. I took the papers, folded them carefully, and tucked them into my jacket pocket. This was my moment. I didn't waste any time. I made a quick call to the lawyer who had handled the paperwork for my mother. His voice was familiar, comforting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hall. It's me, my name. I need some assistance." After explaining the situation and asking for his advice, he agreed to help me take the necessary legal steps. The process would be simple, but it would send a clear message: this house was mine, not theirs. I didn't feel anger, not yet. I didn't feel like I was getting revenge. I simply felt free. When Lisa and my father returned from their vacation, they would find that nothing was the same. And I wasn't going to apologize for it. The days passed slowly. I spent them reorganizing the house, sorting through my mother's old belongings, and preparing for what was to come. It was strange, being in a house that had once felt so full of life and now felt like a place I was reclaiming from the past. Each room I walked into felt like a piece of my history. And I was ready to take back everything they'd tried to erase. The phone call from my lawyer came sooner than I expected. "Everything is in place," Mr. Hall's voice came through the receiver. "The paperwork is filed. I've ensured the deed is transferred into your name. You are the legal owner now." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was official. I thanked him and hung up, then stood by the window, looking out over the front yard. I could see the street, the cars passing by, the people going about their day. But I didn't feel like I was just watching life go by anymore. I was part of it. I had control over my life now. When Lisa and my father came back, they would be stunned. 3 days later, their flight landed, and I waited. It wasn't long before I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I didn't go out to greet them. Why should I? They hadn't bothered to include me in their lives, and now it was time for them to realize that I was no longer the kid they could push around. The front door opened, and I heard their voices in the hallway. Lisa's laugh echoed through the house, and my father's gruff voice followed. But when they reached the living room, everything stopped. I had made sure to make some changes while they were gone. The furniture had been rearranged, the expensive art pieces Lisa adored had been replaced with some of my mother's paintings. The place was no longer an extension of Lisa's life, it was a reflection of my mother's legacy, of what had always been mine. Lisa froze as she looked around the room, her smile faltering. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight with confusion. I didn't respond right away. I walked slowly into the room, meeting their gaze. "This is my home," I said, my voice calm, but carrying an undeniable weight. "And I'm not leaving." For a moment, there was silence. My father stood still, his eyes darting between me and the changes I had made. Lisa opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "What do you mean, you're not leaving?" she finally managed to ask, her voice sharp. "This is our house. You don't get to just..." "No," I interrupted. "This house is mine. Legally, and now, it's also my home." I pulled the papers from my pocket and held them up. My father's face turned pale as he read the documents. His eyes shifted between me and Lisa, who was still standing frozen in place. You can't be serious," my father stammered. I nodded, finally feeling the rush of vindication. "I am serious. This house was my mother's, and she made sure it would be mine after she passed. You have no right to anything here." There was a long pause. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but she could see it in my eyes. I wasn't backing down. "You knew," I said quietly, locking eyes with my father. "You just never thought I would do anything about it." He swallowed hard, his shoulders slumping. For the first time, I saw him without the confidence he usually had when dealing with me. He was realizing that everything had changed. He turned to Lisa, and their silent conversation was enough. She huffed in frustration, crossed her arms, and muttered something under her breath. Finally, my father spoke. "What now?" I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Now, you leave." There was no anger in my voice, just a quiet finality. I had done this for myself. For my future. Lisa opened her mouth to protest, but she knew there was no point. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. My father hesitated, then followed her out, his shoulders heavy with defeat. The door slammed shut behind them, and I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. I was alone in the house, but for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. This was my home now. And no one was ever taking it from me again.